Can you hear? Okay. The discussion that you hear a lot is that do Christians have to go to church? Do I have to be part of church? I love Jesus, I don't love church. In the Buddhist tradition, I take refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha. So my question is, if a Buddhist asks, do I have to be part of a Sangha, of a community, what do you tell them?
Yeah, very good question. Someone asked me that question about a month ago. And I say simply this. As Jesus walked about teaching and doing and giving and sharing with other people, I doubted very seriously that Jesus had time to spend a great deal of time in the synagogues. And so with that example, my first answer would be, no, you don't. I remember when I was a young pastor, someone asked me that question, do I have to go to church in order to love God? And if I don't go to church, am I going to burn up in hell? And it was kind of tough at that particular time to answer that question because, you say the wrong thing, you're out. But you say the right thing, and, well, it's just you and your kids. But I did. I pulled the person to the side. I said, look, the scriptures indicate that Jesus didn't spend a great deal of time in the synagogue. And so, short answer is, I don't think you really have to go to church in order to be a Christian. Many of our politicians today are Christians. And many of our world leaders are Christians. And I doubt very seriously on the campaign trail they have time to get into church. So I don't think that you have to be in church in order to serve God. The bit about being Buddhist and committing yourself, taking refuge in the Sangha. I often tell Buddhists, I don't expect for you to be here all the time, but I do expect for you to live out your vows wherever you are, wherever you may be. Take the community, the Sangha, with you in your mind. If you can, within reason, get to a Sangha, as I would tell a Christian, get to a church so that you can fellowship and share. But I don't think it's a requirement. I don't think that God's going to be like, your quota was, 700 times throughout the year, so you missed it by 2 or 3. I don't think we're going to end because of that. Somebody over here.
I got a question right here. I wanted to ask a question about prayer and meditation.
Yeah.
I was raised Baptist and taught to pray, and Jesus said in the Bible, I guess against prayer, don't pray out in public like the Gentiles do. Don't make a big deal about it. Go into a closet and pray quietly, privately, only you and the Father know about it. And I guess my question has to do with, I felt a lot of loss, or not in Christianity, like the prayer that I was taught just didn't make it. And it was only until late adulthood, several years ago, that I brought in Buddhist meditation sitting that has just really allowed me to develop a whole lot stronger. And I was just curious if you could make some comments on that.
Sure. For years, even as a pastor, I would say these things that would really not resonate with a lot of people who were of conservative fundamentalist viewpoint. I would often say that prayer, in any respect that you look at it, especially in the church, let's talk particularly about the church, prayer is vital. Yet, it is somewhat of a supplement to your very being. A supplement, kind of like a vitamin. It's you can make it without it. However, it is necessary for you as an internal practice to stay connected. It's a part of staying connected to what you believe. It is a part of staying connected to the very community that thinks the same way. It is a part of connecting within yourself. We have a tendency sometimes as people of faith, specifically Christians, have a tendency sometimes to, my mom used to call it praying at. We pray at. It's never an internalized practice. It's always, we're we're gonna pray at God, or we're gonna pray at Jesus. Catholics would pray at Mary. My mom used to tell me that. She says, "Well, what you need to do is you need to pray within." And of course, that didn't make a whole lot of sense, but later it would. Prayer is a supplement. It is what keeps you connected to the practice of your faith. It is what keeps you connected to the practice of your passion. So we spend a great deal of time praying at, but we should internalize the prayer so that we can become stronger and more committed to what it is that we believe, or towards what we intend to practice. If that makes sense.
I know when I read Thich Nhat Hanh, The Living Christ, Living Buddha,
Right.
it was Buddhism since then has been able to make me a better Christian.
Sounds like a good book.
Yeah, so I want to know from your perspective, though. When I shared it with a Nazarene pastor, he says, "Well, it sounds like Thich Nhat Hanh got it half right." So I'm curious in your transformation, were you able to go from the way, the truth, the light to teacher? I'm moving now over to Buddhism.
Yeah. For me, I've been Buddhist for 24 years. And I had been a Christian most of my life. And there was a particular moment, for those 24 years, I really struggled because you're Christian over here, you do all of the practices, you pray, you do all of the things that Christians do. The lingo, the language, how to talk and how to, I knew all of those things. Went on to get 2 masters and my PhD in systematic theology. Had an opportunity to study at Harvard. And so I knew these very deep things about the faith. I knew these very critical things. But on the other side, there was my studies of Buddhism. There was the internalized contemplation, the things that I read of the Buddha. And I guess for me, the way took on new meaning when those two started making sense together. Jesus talked about a way, and the Buddha talked about a way. And so then the way became the subject of my study. What way? It can't be theological because they are from 2 different dynasties of thought. They're 2 dynamically or diametrically opposed to each other theologically. One speaks of deity, the other speaks of self. In Buddhism, there is no deity. We don't worship the Buddha. There is nothing to convert to because all of the work is done within yourself. In Christianity, it spoke of this conversion process. You may remember Nicodemus wanting to know, how do I do this? How do I, become born again? And Pauline theology talks a great deal about conversion and transformation and metamorphosis, so to speak, of the soul. But for me, getting aside from theology and philosophy, the subject of the way. What do they mean by the way? The way. The early Christians were called followers of the way. They weren't called Christians. They were called followers of the way. What way? What does that mean? And so it made my mind immediately traverse to demographic studies, location, which then brought about social studies. What is it about this particular demographic that could be plausible with regards to action? Because apparently when you look at many things theologically, you'll say, well, all you have to do is pray and then poof, there it is. So there's no demographic. God can do whatever he wants to do anytime he wants to do it. But these 2 gentlemen, Jesus and Buddha, are talking about a way, a practiced way. Something, if you want to see something done, then follow this way. And that too, this kind of really didn't set well with me because, God, I thought all I had to do was just pray for it.
Is the way not the path to the New Jerusalem?
The way, I think, was more physical in nature, as opposed to a philosophy. The way itself will change the way of generosity, the way of habit, the way of attitude, the way of perspective based upon the environment. And when I say environment, I think more particularly the people that are in the environment and the trees and the animals. I think the way of observation of what happens around us every single day is the way in which Jesus and the Buddha actually taught. Yes, it is. It is the way itself will lead us to the New Jerusalem, the new way of being, the new kingdom. It will lead us to nirvana, so to speak. The way. I think sometimes we spend a great deal being very mythical, and not that mythicalism is not important. I think it's great to be very mythical and very mystic in our thinking, but I think it's more important to be more practical. The beauty of the miracle itself is found in practicality. For some man to all of a sudden decide, however that happens, just because he looks in the eyes of a child and realizes, I was once a child, and decide not to abuse that child, is a miracle. The practical things, someone deciding to steal something and then realizing that there's someone else in the store stealing that's a little far off, more worse off than they are, and then deciding not to steal. Those are the miracles. Those are the miracles that we should observe and that we should try to help make to happen. So that makes sense. Got about 5 minutes here, so yes.
Hi. So my roots are Catholic and then evangelical Christianity for years. Very, very, very active. And then transitioning into Buddhism.
Right.
So I relate still directly to Jesus.
Right.
And I don't really, I'm going to share on my journey and see how you respond or what your thoughts are. I don't feel like with Jesus I have to reconcile this thought that I'm going to share with you, but I do feel there's some compulsion somehow in, if I'm talking with Christians and Buddhists, which never happens together, that there's some need to reconcile it, which is this sense of emptiness. And when one of the things that I felt took me eventually into this path where I am is there was a feeling that there was something fundamentally wrong with being empty. There was something's wrong. Not just with me, there is something fundamentally wrong. And as I started sitting and meditating day after day, and noticed emptiness, I